Hey y'all, welcome back to Andy's Little Homestead. I wish my mind could forget what my eyes have seen.
That one over there lost a 15-year-old boy. House caught on fire. He was asleep on the couch. By the time smoke got to him, he couldn't get out.
That's one of my favorite quotes. It's from Dave Parnell. He was an engineer with Detroit Fire Department for like a million years. And it's definitely something that a lot of people can relate to. And if you can't personally relate to it, I promise you know someone who can.
Guy died in that house and laid up there for 3 days.
And I am in no way an expert on PTSD or other mental disorders. I'm not a psychiatrist, but
The whole family was in the car, and mom was drunk. One of the kids got killed.
today that's what we're going to talk about. Because I am a veteran and I have been in the fire service for a while, and I've got a few dead friends.
Guy was pinned underneath the dash when he wrecked a van up here. He was screaming the whole time. We got him out though.
Now, PTSD is something that's pretty widely known and talked about within the veteran community. It's out there, but it's something that affects more than just veterans, and first responders are a very big part of that.
That guy was left in the house for a week, and the dogs started eating his arm. Like from there to there was picked completely clean.
The other thing that's unique about PTSD and first responders is the fact that they generally live in the community where they're working. Cops, firemen, they've all seen the underbelly, so to speak.
Narcan the same mom at that one for probably 4 or 5 times.
They're not detached from it like some kind of, a war zone that's thousands of miles away. They'll drive by whatever it is that they've seen every single day. So it's kind of a different animal.
Back that way, a guy wandered off in the woods and shot himself in the face. Down this way, a house burned up like 3 days before Christmas. They lost absolutely everything, and they didn't have much to begin with.
Now, before I go into this any further, I, by definition, don't have PTSD.
Actually, as it turns out, I have a 0% success rate with CPR. I pushed on probably 20, 25 of them, and ain't one of them got brought back to life.
By the clinical definition, it's supposed to be tied to a single event.
Sounds bad, but the average is like 9%, so I'm just a little worse than average.
There's, characterized by flashbacks and a bunch of other stuff, and there's no single event.
Guy over there hung himself from the rafter of the barn, right out by the road, completely visible to anybody that was driving by. I really do hope nobody with kids had to drive by and see that.
But there's been a lot of things, and those things can kind of stack up. I don't have flashbacks, but sometimes I have trouble sleeping. But what I do have, and what I've talked about, publicly on here, is that I deal with anxiety and depression, and, also a raging alcoholic. By the grace of God, I've been sober for 5 years. And while I can't nail down the exact source of that or whatever, there's a number of factors. I'm positive that some of the stuff that I've seen was at least a factor. One of the things that a lot of people don't necessarily realize when it comes to alcoholism, it's not just a compulsion, it's a desire to turn the volume down. When your mind starts running with thoughts or things that you've been through, it works for a little bit. And ultimately, you're just borrowing that piece from tomorrow. But that is one of the reasons that people end up in that situation and with that addiction, because it works. Now, I've said all this to say that I don't actually have an answer. One of the common things that gets kind of thrown around is, well, if you're in trouble, or if you're having difficult thoughts, or this, that, or the other, just reach out to somebody. One of the things that I've found is that the people who are inclined to suffer in silence are the ones who are used to being reached out to. They're the good friends. They're the ones who you would call at 3 o'clock in the morning, and they'd get up and do anything to help you out. They're just not wired that way. They're not wired to seek help from other people. And that can be a problem. That makes it difficult. So a lot of times, you know, when people do end up reaching out, especially within the veteran community, going to the VA, they end up getting medicated. And a lot of those medications are talked of in a way that it's like a life sentence. But the way medication interacts with your brain is not a constant thing. It's kind of rare that someone will have a medication that helps them out in their mental health and it just stays good. And sometimes dosages need to be increased, sometimes things need to change, but it's a constant chemical maintenance to get you somewhere near level but never fixed. Now, I've been on anxiety and depression medications. It's been over a year since I've been on them. And I'm not anti-medication by any stretch of the imagination. I had talked to a psychologist not too long ago who made the point, well, you needed the bridge to get over the river, and now that you're over the river, you may not need the bridge anymore, but that doesn't mean that you didn't need it at the time. So I'm not against it. But I do question the effectiveness of a long-term plan with it. Therapy can be good. I feel like if it's done with concrete goals in mind and you're just at a point where you can't even sort out exactly what it is that you're thinking or feeling, and you don't have any of that nailed down, I think it's a good thing. I don't necessarily know if it is good long term. And I'm sure that plenty of people are going to disagree with me on that, but I don't know if I see the effectiveness in an hour-long appointment every other week for the rest of your life so you can talk about the things that you went through in a time and place that you don't live anymore. I think that there is some potential harm in just constantly ruminating on what's in the past instead of truly attempting to leave it where it is. And here in recent times, we've come into there's been more knowledge and awareness of what I'd call unconventional therapies, psychedelics and things like that, and I don't know anything about it. Anecdotally, I've heard of it working for some people, and well, the problem with that is that you may be operating on a fine line in a legal sense, and it's expensive to fly to Mexico and eat a bunch of mushrooms, so I don't know. Now, once again, I'm not an expert, but I can tell you what has worked for me. To keep the voices quiet. Not literal voices, don't worry, but to turn the noise down and to keep moving forward and with my life. The first one that I don't think gets recognized enough is having a tribe, and that kind of gets overused, but there's something to it. You see, there's a camaraderie that exists within the military and that exists in the fire service too, based on shared experiences, often manifesting itself in some of the most f***ed up jokes you've ever heard in your life. Honestly, if someone sat down and recorded everything that was said back and forth between first responders, every one of us would be locked up in a padded room. I'd imagine it's probably a coping mechanism, but it works. That messed up sense of humor takes something that's incredibly difficult and it brings it down to funny. And it's a lot easier for something to be funny than it is for it to be terrible. I ain't gonna argue with it. The next one that's helped me out tremendously has been getting moving. And I don't really know all of the psychology that's behind this, but I found it to be effective. I started working out back in November, and in the last 2 months I talked to y'all about training for this marathon, and the biggest question that I get is, why? Why would you willingly, intentionally do something like that? And the reason is pretty simple. Working out was fun, but with running, I've got to win 100 small victories throughout it. Every time that my brain is telling me to stop, I've got to overcome that. So it's not just a physical exercise, it's a mental struggle, but one that I'm in control of. When you do hard things that you don't really want to do, that actually helps build up an area of your brain called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. Thank you, Dr. Huberman. And basically, just like a muscle, the more it gets used, the better it is at working. So the more you do hard things, the better you are at doing hard things. But it's more than just that. Most of my running I do on trails in this area, and I'll be gone for 45 minutes, an hour, hour and a half. The miles keep adding up. And during that time, my mind is quiet. It's really the only time while I'm awake that my mind is quiet. So I'm working to constantly overcome challenges within my own head. And it makes all other mental challenges that much easier. I don't run to be sexy. I was sexy when I was chubby. I run for the quiet. One of the other big things that has helped me out with anything that I've seen or been through is just that I recognize my purpose. I do believe that I'm wired to try and help people, or else the prospect of running into a burning building wouldn't be appealing. That's not something that I did. That's not something that's an accomplishment. It's probably its own mental disorder, but whatever. The point is, I've wanted to be a fireman since I was a little kid, and that's tied up in my purpose for being on this earth. There are times where we'll get a call and I'll, hear it's a car wreck and there's kids involved, or something that's generally difficult, and I'll get a knot in my stomach. But it goes away very quickly with a quick conversation with God. And the overwhelming sense that I get from it that just says, this is why you're here, go. Now, all these things are tied up in my own personal faith, and finding faith is a difficult one. And it can be particularly difficult for those who have seen the absolute worst of what this world and people in it have to offer. How can a good and loving God allow all these terrible things to happen? But I already know that we live in a sinful and fallen world. As a baseline, people are terrible. The idea that people are good is I think it's a modern creation. You take away all the comforts of modern life, or whatever, you see just how good people are at their baseline. It doesn't exist. But I also know through all the bad things that have happened to me, all the bad choices that I've made, even those can be used for good. Every experience accumulates in our mind to form who we are and what we do. And if we identify ourselves as existing to serve God and to do good for others, then the things that happen of this world have little effect on us. So whoever you are, whatever it is that you've been through or seen or done, there's a good chance that it's not your fault. But you've already been through it, and it is your responsibility to handle. And that's difficult, but it's also liberating in a way. When we decide that we no longer have control over our mind or our direction or anything about our lives, it's easy to feel hopeless. But if you're a fireman or a veteran, you're already strong. You're already capable of overcoming difficult things. So it's my sincere hope that if you're listening to this, you'll get up, you'll get moving, you'll talk to the man upstairs, and you'll talk to a shrink, and you'll do all the things that you need to do to get back right, because it can be done. I truly 100% believe that. And I want to thank y'all for being here. I promise we'll get back to our regularly scheduled building code violations and all that stuff next week. I'm finally starting to feel a little bit better. And I especially want to thank everybody who signed up for the subscription service. I'll drop that down below. Y'all are the only reason that I'm able to keep doing this. That would make more sense if you watched last week's video, so watch it or don't. But I'm truly grateful for the opportunity to talk to y'all about these things that I feel like are important. As always, I hope y'all enjoyed, and I hope you learned something. I love you, and God bless. It's not all terrible. I will never forget my first apartment. The address was way. There was an old folks home there, and in this old folks home was a lady. She was a big one. She was a big one. Probably 450, 500 pounds. This lady's family member liked to sneak in booze for her, and each one of the rooms had a pull alarm that would automatically dispatch us. So what she would do is she would drink a whole bottle of brandy, take off all her clothes, and pull the alarm and wait for the firemen to show up. She did it like 4 or 5 times before she was kicked out. Like I said, I wish my mind could forget the things my eyes have seen.